What if the morality you cling to, the one you inherited, defend, perform, isn't making the world better? What if it's making it worse? What if your belief in goodness is the reason someone else is being silenced, erased, or destroyed? This is not a story, not a sermon. This is a warning to the world and to you. A warning to those who obey out of fear but call it virtue. To those who punish in the name of progress. To those who carry a sword and call it compassion. And to those who truly believe they are the good ones. We were given a script, not to read, to recite. We were told who the villains are, who the heroes must be, what to praise, what to shame, what to post, what to hate. We were told that good is easy to spot, that evil always looks like someone else, that moral clarity comes not from thought, but from belonging. But here's the first fracture. Every tribe tells that story. Every empire calls itself just. Every ideology says we're the light, they're the darkness. So what if that's the real darkness? Nietzsche once wrote of a madman who ran into the marketplace, screaming that God was dead. Not out of rebellion, but because no one seemed to notice. He wasn't laughing, he was mourning. Because when the God of certainty dies, when the center collapses, we don't become free. We become desperate, desperate for a new morality, a new tribe, a new cause to make us feel like we're still on the good side of history. We are that desperation. We no longer bow to gods. We bow to outrage, to algorithms, to whatever moral panic is trending this week, and we call that progress. But this is your warning, that the world you think is moral may only be loud, that what you call values may be conditioning, that what you defend with your whole identity may not be goodness, but fear. Because when you take away the commandments and all that's left is judgment, something ancient stirs beneath the slogans. You begin to see that good and evil are not fixed stars in the sky, they are mirrors. And we've been polishing only one side, so here you are, not for inspiration, but confrontation. Because what's coming next isn't comfort, it's the unraveling. And if you have the courage to watch your own morality crack up, then maybe, just maybe, you'll find something deeper on the other side. But first, you must look away from the light and stare directly into the abyss. Everyone wants to be the good one. It's the most seductive story ever told. That we're the righteous, that our cause is just, that our enemies are cruel, stupid, or broken. And that if we just follow the path, believe the right things, say the right words, stand with the right crowd, we'll be on the right side of history. We're taught that from birth, in classrooms, in families, in every cultural myth ever written. Good, evil, heroes, villains. But here's the first rupture. Every side believes that. Every tribe has their commandments. Every generation thinks they've finally figured out the moral truth. Every system trains its children to believe that obedience is goodness and questioning is betrayal. So what happens when you start to question? There's a story you may not have heard. A city, perfect on the surface, joyful, peaceful, harmony everywhere. But its happiness rests on a single condition: a child kept alone in filth, pain, and darkness, abandoned. Everyone knows. No one is allowed to help because the entire city's peace depends on that one child's suffering. Some forget, some justify, and a few, just a few, walk away. This is the ones who walk away from Omelas. It isn't science fiction, it's prophecy. Because we all live in Omelas. Our comfort rests on quiet suffering, on invisible labor, on scapegoats chosen to maintain the illusion of purity. We say, but I didn't build this, but I'm just doing my part, but I'm not the villain, and yet we stay. Because leaving the myth is terrifying. The myth says, you are good because you suffer, because you conform, because you're on the right side. But here's the paradox. The more certain you are that you are good, the more blind you become to the harm you cause. The more fiercely you defend your side, the less you see the people on the other one. The more desperately you try to be moral, the more you perform it until it's no longer virtue, it's theater. We say we want justice, but what we want more is to be seen as just. We say we want truth, but what we want more is to be safe. We say we want to do good, But what we want more is to belong, and so we don't speak, we don't question, we repeat, and in doing so we trade our integrity for applause. But every morality built on performance requires someone to be punished. The heretic, the dissenter, the non-compliant, the person who dares to say, this doesn't feel like goodness, this feels like control, and when that person appears, we turn them into the villain because we need one. This is the comfort of moral myths. They don't just tell us who we are, they tell us who to blame. But the moment you stop blaming, the moment you stop pointing and start looking, something begins to break. The edges blur, the sides dissolve, and you see it clearly. The morality you were given was not the truth. It was a map designed by others for a world you didn't build, and suddenly you're off the map. You're standing in a space where there are no clear answers, no good guys, no evil empire, just choices, just consequences. This is the abyss, not of despair, but of freedom. Because for the first time, you're not asking, what would a good person do? You're asking, what do I truly believe? And that question, asked honestly, is more dangerous to moral systems than any rebellion ever was. There is a kind of hatred that doesn't look like hatred. It looks like empathy. It sounds like justice. It calls itself moral. And it's everywhere. Nietzsche had a name for it, resentiment, the hidden rage of those who feel powerless, the bitterness of those who cannot rise, rebranded as righteousness. When a person cannot compete, they declare the game unfair. When they cannot climb, they call the mountain oppressive. When they cannot shine, they convince the world that light itself is harmful. And so begins a slow inversion. Strength becomes cruelty, ambition becomes arrogance, truth becomes violence, and the weak, simply by being weak, are declared holy. It is not done with malice, it's done with conviction, with applause, because when we no longer believe we can win by excelling, we learn to win by accusing, by policing, by casting ourselves as the injured party, and anyone who threatens that status as the oppressor. Resentment turns morality into a performance, one where victimhood becomes power and power becomes sin. It's not just a cultural shift, it's a psychological trap. Studies now show that those who signal their virtue most loudly, those who constantly present themselves as victims, are often more narcissistic, more manipulative, more likely to lie. Because in a society that rewards fragility, strength must be hidden. And pain, real or exaggerated, becomes currency. We see it in the influencer who weaponizes tears, in the public figure who demands apologies but never gives them, in the comment section that celebrates takedowns more than truth. But resentment doesn't just live in others, it lives in you and in me. It appears in the moment you resent someone for succeeding, when you whisper to yourself that their freedom is selfish, that their confidence is toxic, that their refusal to play along makes them dangerous. It's easier to call someone evil than to admit we're envious. It's easier to shame someone than to face our own insecurity. And so we dress our resentment in ethical language. We hide our helplessness behind collective outrage. We convince ourselves that tearing someone down is a form of progress. But this morality isn't healing the world, it's dividing it, hollowing it, because when morality becomes a tool of the envious, it stops elevating, it starts equalizing by force. Not to lift people up, but to drag the tall ones down. We call it justice, but it's punishment. We call it inclusion, but it's control. We call it care, but it's coercion. And the most tragic part, we believe it. We believe we are being good, even when we are attacking, even when we are silencing, even when we are turning strangers into symbols of everything we hate. That's how resentment survives, by hiding inside the halo, by making you feel virtuous while you rot. And the only cure is the one no one wants: radical self-honesty. The willingness to look at your motives and ask, am I truly helping? Or am I punishing under the guise of justice? Because when you strip away the performance, when you stare into the mirror without justifications, you begin to see what morality has become. Not a compass, but a mask. Not a path to truth, but a stage for resentment to act like virtue. And the moment you admit that, not in theory, but in your own life, you begin to break the spell. You begin to step beyond good and evil, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started seeing. There is a story, hidden in the folds of Buddhist tradition, about a ship's captain who discovers a man aboard planning to murder everyone on board. The captain could do nothing. He could pray, he could warn the others, he could try to stop him with words. But he doesn't. He kills the man, silently, swiftly, not out of hatred, not to save his own life, but because he cannot bear to watch this man damn himself by committing an atrocity. He takes the karmic burden upon himself so that 500 others and the killer himself might be spared. Was he evil, or something beyond what we're willing to define? We want morality to be clean. We want heroes who never lie, villains who never suffer, rules that apply in every case. But life doesn't care about your purity. It gives you tragedy, ambiguity, moments where every choice wounds something, and in those moments the myth of moral clarity shatters. Because when you are in the lifeboat, when someone must be sacrificed or all will die, the question is no longer what is good, it's what can I live with. But even then, morality finds a way to judge you. Look at the case of R.V. Dudley and Stevens, shipwrecked, starving, they drew lots. They killed the weakest boy to survive, and when they were rescued, they were put on trial, not because what they did was cruel, but because society couldn't bear to admit that sometimes the morally impossible happens. We need evil to be obvious. We need to believe that all suffering has a villain. But sometimes evil doesn't come from hate, it comes from certainty. The inquisitor who burns the heretic believes he's saving souls. The revolutionary who purges the opposition believes he's cleansing the future. The activist who ruins a stranger's life online believes she's protecting the marginalized. Every atrocity in history has marched forward beneath a banner called the good, and that's the danger Nietzsche warned us about, not the presence of evil, but the moment when good stops questioning itself. That's when the halo becomes a weapon. That's when justice becomes vengeance. That's when safety becomes control. That's when the savior becomes the tyrant. Because if your morality depends on having an enemy, it will invent one. And if your virtue is measured by who you destroy, then it isn't virtue. It's violence in a prettier dress. And here lies the paradox. The more pure your cause, the more dangerous you become, because purity doesn't tolerate dissent. Purity doesn't make room for complexity. Purity must be defended at any cost, even if the cost is truth, even if the cost is mercy, even if the cost is your soul. So what do you do when you realize that what you've called good is capable of evil? You stop worshipping your ideals and you start watching your actions. You stop chasing purity and you begin telling the truth. You stop asking, what side am I on? And start asking, what kind of person am I becoming? Because good and evil are no longer the question. The question now is this: are you willing to do what's right even if no one calls it good? There was a time when right and wrong were carved into stone, when people lived by commandments passed down, not chosen. And while those commandments sometimes hurt, they held something that modern morality has lost: humility. The humility to believe in something greater than your own opinion. The humility to restrain judgment. The humility to question your own virtue. Immanuel Kant once said that to act morally was to do only that which could become a universal law, not what felt good, not what was popular, but what was timeless. You could not lie, even if lying would save a life. You could not use another human being as a means to an end, even for a noble cause. To Kant, morality was a form of discipline, a structure of reason, a rejection of chaos, but then chaos came anyway. We killed the old gods and we did not replace them. We unhooked the moral compass from tradition but never reoriented it toward truth. Now we drift. We no longer ask what is right, we ask what is accepted, we ask what will get applause, what won't get us cancelled. We have traded the weight of eternal principles for the whims of moral fashion. And we call that freedom. But it isn't freedom, it's performance. A morality built on fear of exile is not morality, it's mimicry. We parade our beliefs like credentials, we display our outrage like trophies, and we scream into the void, not because we are just, but because we are terrified of being next. Because the mob does not care about truth, only heat, only noise. And so we burn people, not for what they've done, but for what they represent. We no longer see humans, we see symbols, and we set them on fire to purify ourselves. Michael Polanyi called this moral inversion, when the passions once reserved for justice become tools of destruction, when moral energy, untethered from ethical restraint, becomes weaponized by resentment. This is the empire we now live in, not of laws, but of narratives, where the accused are presumed guilty, where the complex are flattened, where the loudest pain wins and the quietest truth is ignored. It is a place where apologies are demanded but never accepted, where forgiveness is weakness, where silence is complicity and nuance is treason. We call this progress, but it's not. It's regression into a tribal morality where only the slogans change. We call it justice. But it's not. It's theatre, a show performed for algorithms and rewarded with digital claps. But beneath the lights, we're exhausted, terrified, alone. Because when everything is moral, everything becomes suspect. And no one knows the rules anymore, so we stay quiet, we keep our heads down, we nod when we disagree, we repost what we don't believe, and we call that compassion. But what it really is surrender. The surrender of truth, the surrender of courage, the surrender of ourselves. This is not the collapse of society, it's the collapse of meaning, of clarity, of trust. And what rises in its place is a system where morality is no longer earned, it's inherited by aligning with the right tribe and revoked the moment you question it. So what now? You could run, you could join in, you could stay quiet forever, or you could do something harder. You could walk away. Not from morality itself, but from the machinery built around it. You could abandon the theatre and begin the work of becoming someone who doesn't need applause to know who they are. Because the empire is falling, not in fire, but in silence, in fear, in the slow erosion of our willingness to say, I don't know, I disagree, or worst of all, I change my mind. This is your invitation to stop pretending, to say what you see. Even if no one claps, even if everyone walks away, especially then, because that's when something stronger begins, something older than ideology, something freer than the tribe. That's when truth returns. There is a moment where the scaffolding falls. Not the world's, yours. Everything you believed made you good crumbles. The obedience, the badges, the tribe, the lines you repeated without ever tasting their truth. And for the first time, you're not standing on the moral high ground. You're floating, weightless, disoriented. You're in the abyss. Nietzsche knew this place. He didn't fear it, he named it, he welcomed it, because beyond good and evil is not a wasteland, it is a beginning. The beginning of self-overcoming. Not rebellion, not reaction, but rebirth. It starts when you stop asking, what do they want me to be, and start asking, what is true in me, even if no one approves. It begins when you look into the mirror, not the public one, but the private one, and face what lives beneath your performance, the pride, the envy, the smallness, the rage you dressed as compassion, the cowardice you called kindness. It is brutal, but it is honest. And then something unexpected happens. You stop performing. You stop apologizing for your clarity. You stop clinging to group absolution and begin carving your own values from experience, from suffering, from fire. You become the phoenix, not metaphorically, literally, because this isn't healing, it's burning. The slow, necessary incineration of everything false. You burn the borrowed beliefs. You burn the costumes. You burn the longing to be praised. And what's left in the ash isn't a cleaner version of you. It's the real one, whole, scarred, unapologetic. This is what Nietzsche meant by becoming who you are, not who you were told to be, not who the algorithm rewards, not who your past self needs you to protect, but the person who stands without needing permission. You begin to say no to things that once defined you. You begin to act without asking, is this allowed? You begin to speak with a voice you forgot you had. This is not arrogance, this is moral adulthood, because when you no longer need the herd to tell you who you are free. Free to build, free to forgive, free to risk, free to love without signaling, free to lead without dominating, free to lose everything and still stand in your own name. This is amor fati, the love of fate, not the passive acceptance of what is, but the passionate embrace of all that shaped you, the suffering, the shame, the shadow. You stop resisting it, and in that surrender you find your strength. You don't escape the abyss, you carry it, and from it you create something that has never existed before. A morality not imposed but born, a truth not taught but lived. You become the source, the storm, the stillness, the one who needed no script to remember who they are. This is your warning, not the kind shouted from a pulpit, not the kind wrapped in prophecy, the quiet kind, the kind that comes too late for most, but not for you. You've walked through the myths. You've seen the resentment that wears a smile. You've seen goodness decay into performance, morality become a stage, and justice a popularity contest. And now you've seen the abyss. You didn't fall, you didn't fly. You stood in it long enough to stop needing escape, and because of that, you are no longer who you were. You are no longer waiting to be told what is good. You are no longer asking for permission to speak. You are no longer molding yourself to fit into a morality that was never yours to begin with. This is the birth of a new kind of being, one who is not clean but clear, not pure but whole, not obedient but true. You are not beyond morality because you've rejected ethics. You are beyond it because you've transcended the performance, and that's the real danger, because people who think for themselves cannot be controlled. People who know their shadow cannot be blackmailed by guilt, and people who no longer need to appear good become terrifying to systems that rely on shame. You were told morality keeps the world together, but what holds the world together is something older: truth, courage, and the sacred willingness to live without a script. This is what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of the Overman. Not a tyrant, not a god, but a creator, a value giver, a soul who stands where others kneel and dares to write what has not yet been written. You have that power now. And so this is your warning to the world, that you will no longer pretend, that you will no longer play a role, that you will no longer sacrifice your truth on the altar of other people's comfort. You are not here to be safe, you are here to be whole. You are not here to follow, you are here to walk alone if you must, because morality without honesty is just another religion, and goodness without self-awareness is just control with a prettier name. So let them point, let them call you lost, let them say you've gone too far, because what they don't understand is that beyond good and evil isn't a void, it's a field. A place beyond judgment, beyond performance, beyond fear. And in that field you meet yourself. No mask, no armor, just the soul that survived the fire and chose to dance anyway. This is not the end. It's the first honest day of your life. And from here, you don't go back, you rise. Out beyond ideas of right and wrong there is a field. You've glimpsed it. In the quiet between shame and freedom, in the moment you questioned everything, in the silence that followed your refusal to perform. That field has no tribes, no purity tests, no rewards for obedience, just others who walked through their own fire and arrived at something new. Some will say you've changed. They're right. You've stopped needing a title to be honest. You've stopped calling yourself good to justify your fear. You've stopped measuring your soul by how well it conforms. Now you measure it by what you're willing to face, by how much truth you can carry without needing applause. This is the field, where no one's virtue is louder than their silence, where no one is holy because no one needs to be, just honest, just real, just free. And if this spoke to something hidden inside you, say so, speak it, write it. Not for likes, but because the world needs to know it's not alone. If you've walked through this fire, even a little, leave something behind in the comments, something true, something that can't be monetized or simplified because someone else is watching this now. Someone still tangled in the myth, still afraid to question, still waiting for permission. And you might be the sign they didn't know they needed. So say it. Say the thing you've never said, the thing that scares you, the thing that sets you free, and maybe, just maybe, we'll meet you there, in the field, beyond good and evil, where something real begins and nothing false survives.